Hello survivors and welcome to Now That's What I Call Survival Horror, the first aid spray show where we discuss the various soundtracks of the genre. My name is Cy and joining me for this episode is Steve.
Hi everybody.
And it's not the first time we've done this, but we're doing a weird pivot, not that when, not just talking about Resident Evil, which happens quite regularly on this show, but this is another example of talking about a franchise for the first time as part of First Aid Spray. On Now That's What I Call Survival Horror. We're going to talk about Alone in the Dark, specifically the original game, which is, I'm looking forward to this because Alone in the Dark is a franchise that we've brought up a lot over the years of First Aid Spray, because obviously it's kind of the seedling for which Resident Evil and the rest of survival horror comes from. So I guess it's kind of inevitable that we would talk about it in some fashion. Steve, is there any particular reason why you were like, yes, Alone in the Dark this time?
There is many things, but basically social media won't shut the hell up about the the up and coming remake, and I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to play the original, and basically, you know what, the music's, it's not terrible, is it? You know what? I think I'll actually share this with the world, because it's strangely, despite it being one of Resident Evil's parents, it doesn't seem to get much love, especially from a musical standpoint. Everyone talks about how it's the one of the first fixed camera angles and the origins of survival horror. Which, okay, cool. At least I'm not talking about Sweet Home for the 50th time. That's nice. Coming soon to Now That's What I Call Survival Horror. No,
you joke, but it might be.
Yeah, you can play that one and figure it out. But no, basically, not spite fueled, but the internet wouldn't shut the hell up. So I played the original and I liked the music, and now I'm inflicting it upon you all as a gift.
It also timed out quite nicely as well, in theory, because I think the 2024 remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it, is coming very soon, or might even be out at this point, depending on when you're listening to this, whether or not you're a Patreon, in which case you would get to hear this episode early. So it's timely in that sense, and I'm looking forward to the remake, because it'll be kind of like my first introduction to Alone in the Dark. In a way, it's a series that I have very little experience with. So this is like when we did Parasite Eve way back in the day before I actually played it. This is another example of one where it's like, I have played Alone in the Dark, the original, a little bit, and I don't know how or why. I don't know if I downloaded it from the internet or it was on some weird disc that was mounted onto a magazine when I was growing up, but I do have a very vague memory of playing just a little bit of it on my PC. It probably would have been about sort of the late 90s, so by that point it was already very aged, so I probably didn't stick with it for that reason. That's pretty much the sum total Alone in the Dark experience for me, so I'm coming at sort of out of the place with no context. But Steve, how big of a fan of the series are you anyway?
Fair weather fan seems unfortunately unfair, but my first Alone in the Dark experience was actually the second game, which also leads to my first encounter with real life crime, as I got mugged for it. We're taking it back from a rental shop. We'll spare that story. That was an experience. Real life crime reflected by crime investigating murder game. No? Very interesting. But my first real foray into it is actually the fourth game, the quote-unquote first reboot, The New Nightmare, which was a lot more Resident Evil focused. You could tell that they basically tried to lift back a lot of what Resident Evil had done and put it into their own kind of spin, their own charm. Very good use of pre-rendered backgrounds in that game. Because of the way they had a torch in it, it would basically unrender the darkness into a light, so you had a working torch on pre-rendered backgrounds and stuff, and spooky scares, atmosphere, lots of files. We're talking reams of pages. Compared to if Resident Evil stuff is a small school folder, this is like an almanac. It's ridiculous, the amount of dialogue and text in that game. Very satisfyingly fun survival horror experience, just a bit of a duff ending if you want to go play that one. After that, I was moderately on board with anything else they did. But unfortunately, the thing that they followed that up with was Alone in the Dark 2008. And, memes aside, wasn't the best game in the world ever. And then the franchise died and didn't have anything else after. No, Alone in the Dark Illumination doesn't exist. What are you on about? It's basically Si, that's like, imagine the worst possible Left 4 Dead.
Right, I know it's a multiplayer game, and then I immediately checked out of the Wikipedia page the first time I saw that, I think. I was like, okay, this doesn't count.
There's so my entire experience playing the first one was literally only this past like 2-3 months.
Okay.
Okay, so what a strange way of going. I did 2, 4, 5, 1, which sounds like a code, but it's not, I promise.
Indeed. We should probably say what this show is if you've listened this far in and you've never actually checked out. Now that's what I call survival horror. This is, as I said at the top, a music-based discussion. Steve has gone through the soundtrack of Alone in the Dark, picked out his top 10 favourite tracks, ranked them from 10 to 1, 1 being the best, and we're going to talk about them as we go through them. As always, these are his personal choices. That's all just subjective, so let us know what you think of the Alone in the Dark soundtrack, what your standouts and your low points are in the comments down below, of course. And I guess without any further ado, Steve, would you like to kick us off with your number 10?
Number 10, Alone in the Dark. Okay, so title track is right out of the gate. This first play, Si, for context, like literally when you finally get control of player character and you have like this full like pre-baked sequence first. For me, this feels like the equivalent of like say the first floor of RE1, you know, that kind of opening setting bit, and the music is this slightly not too scary, but it's like an uneasy backing percussion kind of doing its thing, making you want to, you know, some kind of eerie whimsy vibe, and then occasionally there's a piano strike go doosh doosh. It's like the idea of looking shiftily left and right from the player perspective. That's the kind of vibe it gives me. It's like not quite Scooby-Doo, like a slightly more intense Scooby-Doo feel.
Yeah, to me, the first thing this made me think of was like murder mystery TV shows. It's got almost sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say something like Cluedo, but it's got that kind of, vibe to it. It's fun, you know, it's kind of bouncy and percussive, like you said. If it has a pipe organ thing at the beginning, which is, you know, the instrument that is so tied to classic horror. If that wasn't there, and in the latter half of the track, it's not there, you don't get a lot of spooky from it. Other than that part, really. It kind of loses the horror after that goes away and replaced by, those piano jabs. It's not really a complaint, just an observation. As we've kind of alluded to at the beginning, horror in video games was still sort of an oddity. Nobody really knew what they were doing up and kind of around to this point. Maybe some weird indie games and stuff. But this feels more at home with point-and-click adventures to me, in a way, which were way more popular on PC at the time. Rather than the horror that was to come sort of from what Alone in the Dark actually achieved. But yeah, not a complaint. It's like when you think Alone in the Dark and one of the forebears of the genre, though, not actually what I was expecting out of a title called Alone in the Dark.
Yeah, the music doesn't really exude that kind of vibe, does it?
No.
I can't get it out of my head now. You said like TV daytime murder mystery stuff, so it's like Miss Marple.
Yes.
As a horror game. That would be amazing. Poirot, but he's being hunted by the tyrant. Let's go.
Where's that mod?
Yeah, innit? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just... Oh, God. Get sidetracked. Okay. All right, so number 9 is technically a tie. All right, there's 2 variances of the same track, and they have very fancy names. In the Eye of the Storm, and I'm Not Afraid, I Think. So these are fundamentally the same, but have a slight differing opening instrumentation between them depending on which player you choose. Like it's not quite a Leon and Claire situation, but Emily Hartwood for Edward Carnby. Edward's is a bit more dour. Emily's is a bit more kind of like an upbeat clarinet kind of vibe going to it. And it plays as you basically drive up in a car, and then you have a walking, like, pre-baked sequence where you watch the player model walk into the house. You get a nice spooky vignette looking out of the window. And much like it, my first notes are, this sounds like a TV show drama theme. So we're going back on the same topic, and my notes literally say the same thing. But I want to shout out those nice, tasty synth organs, and it's 1992. Like, it's very nice.
Yeah, this is interesting because I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but as someone that grew up playing console games, I sort of forget that the advancements that PC games were making at the time, because the depth of instrumentation for the early 90s in this is kind of surprising to me, because, early 90s on console games was all sort of 16-bit and stuff. But this has got a real depth and life to it. I really love when video games do different themes for different characters, even if they're doing the same thing. And I know the scene you're talking about. I remember that very much so, and also just from editing footage for work. So I've definitely seen that part. Very playful, pizzicato sort of strings, but the rest of this is quite aggressive. The piano that comes in, there's a bit of sort of swirling danger to it all. It's got a bit of a Hammer House of Horror feel, which is because it's kind of like you said in the last one, it's kind of campy, but there is some threat to this one all the same, especially because the speed that all of this is coming at you is it generates a bit of an uncomfortable vibe. So while I thought the Turtle Scream was kind of fairly devoid of horror, as it were, it's starting to come in now as you're actually getting to take control of the character as you arrive at the location.
Number 8. Run for your life. So we've literally just had the start of the game, so let's have the end of the game.
Sure.
Yeah, to contextualise, but just before this theme happens, player characters literally launch their one source of light, a lantern, at the evil roots of the house, the main source of the problem. And there's even a screen, which is really cool. Like, the screen shakes. It sounds as if there's even a siren blaring in the distance in a 1940s house. The main issue is, the reason why this is so low down the list is, at this point, obviously the big bad's dead, and there is literally nothing left to do except leave the cavern and walk out. There's no timer, there's no real countdown. And it's a long journey, right? Now, it's got really great instrumentation, but it stops after about 2 minutes. And then you're walking home in silence. Like, it's...
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. It kind of ruins the vibe. I mean, there's a lot of silence in Alone in the Dark, don't get me wrong. There is some music that plays quite frequently. We'll get there. But there's also a lot of quiet moments. But the ending, no bad. Not good.
That's a shame, because this piece of music I thought was awesome. It's really interesting. I love how Alone in the Dark, you can almost see here, is setting the blueprint for Resident Evil to follow. Both the gameplay element of there being kind of a last escape theme. You've fought down the boss or the sort of pre-boss, and everything's kicking off. But also just how kick-ass a theme it is. And the escape themes of Resident Evil are all pretty damn good. That underlying synth is deadly. Very sort of late 70s and early 80s sci-fi horror sort of vibe, which is really far and away from all the sort of charmingly silly stuff that we just talked about. I would never have guessed that this came from the same game, let alone, in fact, the original Alone in the Dark, which is now 30-something years old. It feels more akin to something like Parasite Eve, for example, with the way that it uses those synths. Really shows the variety of music on offer in this soundtrack. I don't know how many tracks there are in this OST, but like, to go from what we just talked about to this, that's quite a journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, start to end, we've covered the entire thing.
No. We've done now. We can go home.
But yeah, no, I'm particularly a big fan of the it's got that heartbeat rhythm. But again, alas, it's 2 minutes long and it doesn't loop, so it kind of loses the charm for me.
Yeah, that's going to kill it. That's a shame.
Number 7, The Battle Against Evil. Right, okay, so there are going to be people who have hopefully played Alone in the Dark before listening to this podcast. Good, well done you. And you know exactly what this track is, because it's the main anthem for the blooming game. Every combat sequence pretty much it plays this. Like anytime a monster jumps out and you're in for a fight, yeah, it's good. But it grates after a while. But it's got that nice fun of being an adventurous RPG battle vibe, but also trying to be scary, but not really succeeding. It's fun, it's light, it's perfect to kick like a little hobbit demon in the face with. Unfortunately, it also plays about 17 million times over the course of the game.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't really matter how good a track is. If it keeps interrupting your play, it will sort of grate on you. Especially, you hear the beginning over and over again of a piece of music. It's just yeah. But another great example, that aside, again, without the context, for me, sort of shows the variety that the soundtrack has. The backing strings, keeping the pressure on. The melody sort of sets the theme of desperation and danger. This might upset some people, but this feels way more literate compared to Resident Evil 1's danger themes, and plenty of survival horror games that they're not able to do sort of sudden combat scenarios in a way that's both immediately able to make you go, oh no, I'm in trouble, sort of out loud, but also nice to listen to, that you can hum along to. This has got a melody, and it's as I say, a literate piece of music, whereas Resident Evil and Dino Crisis, they're both cacophonies when stuff happens. When the dogs come jumping through the windows, it's just noise, essentially, isn't it? Sometimes that works. Sometimes that's for better or worse. We talked about in the Dino Crisis episodes. People are going to have different opinions on that. But this is a full track that kind of spins out in different directions, and you can kind of follow that along as it goes. This is, and as you just said, a piece of music that commonly occurs throughout the original game. It'd be really interesting to see if this is one piece of music that can transfer to the reboot. I would love some of those kind of nods and winks for the really old school fans of the franchise. It's always nice when you get a musical thing come through and you go, oh, I know that. Everyone remembers walking into the RPD in Remake 2 and just hearing the church bell and going in the save room for the first time and hearing the melody on the piano briefly. If they could pull this through in some way that's not constantly playing like it does in this version, that could be really cool, a fully orchestrated version of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. As much stick as I give it, it's higher up on the list for a reason.
It's good.
Yeah, for me, it's can you imagine watching an Indiana Jones film and literally hearing the theme every 5 seconds? That's what it feels like, unfortunately. Yeah, banger, but also, my God, let's play something else.
Yes.
Number 6, Terror. Right, okay. Now this one, unfortunately, is a victim of the previous track a lot of the time. This one tends to get cut off by the battle theme, an awful lot. And this is the most Resident Evil feeling track out of the whole soundtrack for me. Right, this feels like Narrow and Close, the proper one, the mansion basement for people in the know. Definitely feels like it's 4-bit. It plays while it's plattering, and occasionally you might hear something strange in the background, or you might get some kind of shocking visual, and then this music is just sending your hair up on the back, and it's it's very It's very synthy, it's very ominous, and I feel like I'm in a different house in the middle of the American Midwest looking for fellow Stars members.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Spot on. If there's a through line, then it's probably this. Everything here is exactly what we compliment a lot of survival horror music on throughout this series. You know, it's simple, it has a sense of mystery and unknown to it. It's a sort of unrestrained composition that kind of wanders around and does its own thing, even more so here because it's got all that reverb on it, which gives it like a really wide, sort of spacious feeling. It feels like you can't turn around because it doesn't matter what direction you face in. You're surrounded by the scares. They're out to get you. They're everywhere. And of course, 1992, Alone in the Dark, it looks like plasticine to me. You can't do a lot for visual frights necessarily at this point. But this is the sort of thing where you can knock it out of the park with the music to make up for it. And imagining playing this game when it was brand new with this in your ears. Something special there for sure. You can kind of see why this inspired a bunch of games to be like, we can really build off of that as visuals got better and that kind of thing. Really, really cool piece of music. Really appropriately named Terror. This is for me, this would be the perfect number one spot, which makes me only wonder, what's left to come.
You see, this is the part where we have to pull the rug out from under people, isn't it? Because as great as Alone in the Dark 1's OST is, and it really has some fun stuff in it, as we've already discussed, there's only a handful of tracks left, and most of them are incidental background tracks. I mean, proper wallpaper tracks. There's even some classical music, we've got Danse Macabre and stuff in there, but that's also technically just stuff that's been brought over. Now, that's no shame on, I believe their name is Philippe Vacher. I may be mispronouncing that, and I apologise, who did great soundtrack work, but it also allows me to cheat and use music from some other Alone in the Dark games. So,
right. Sure.
Number 5 is, because I can't get decent names, you're going to have to take it, everybody. Number 5 is title screen theme from Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. So, first and foremost, Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare's music, while fantastic in my opinion, is a little bit vague as to who wrote what. And what little credit I can give is either to Thierry Dessau or Stuart Copeland. Now, Copeland, we famously may know, is the composer for Spyro the Dragon and part of a little-known band in England called The Police. This is sarcasm, obviously. I'm sure everybody knows who Spyro is. Right, onto the track itself, though. This is going to sound strange, Si, right? But it's rare we get a survival horror game with quite as much opening bite on the title screen music, Mm-hmm. It sounds like a storm. It's evoking the energy of a slasher killer to me. If you told me this was some kind of cyberpunk stalker music, I'd believe you, right? But this is the title screen, and it's already annihilated the entirety of the original game's OST for me. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's very not Silent Hill, but you could believe it could have been.
Yes, definitely. I was struggling not to make that comparison. Obviously, it's so funny, especially for anyone that hasn't is not au fait with Alone in the Dark's soundtracks or history, like I am. Going through this episode, this is such a departure from what we were just talking about. And you know what? I'm here for it. This really has its own identity. It's a weird one. I wouldn't know how to describe it as from a personal. How do I feel about it as a piece of music? Is it good? Is it great? Is it bad? I don't know, because it hardly feels like music, as we know it. It sounds like an interlude from unreleased Nine Inch Nails album or something. I'm sort of half expecting Trent Reznor to come in crooning on top of it. Banging, crashing, sort of a reverberating carousel of noise. It's kind of hypnotic. But then it kind of loses the sturdy beat that it's got and just goes off on a tangent, basically. It goes mad, aggressively breaks out of a standard rhythm, puts you on edge. Yeah, what a way to start a game. What a way to take a franchise and I don't want to say throw out what came before and be like, this is the new hotness. We're doing everything over. This is what we're going for this time. It's a pretty bold first impression. I can't fault your choice of this because it's very striking.
So down with Miss Marple, in with Depeche Mode.
Obscure Gary Newman.
Okay, so moving onwards and upwards. Number 4, The Garden. Again, I really wish I could find honest track names, but what I can find of None of the Dark soundtrack is normally their PC-like license things. It doesn't give you anything other than that. Right, this is the track that plays at the start of the game if you play as Carnby, right, and you're out in the garden, and it's got a nice, almost aggressive ambience going on. Like there's a creepy breathing. I'm trying to make, it's hard to do that without my microphone not picking it up. And then you've got synth stab music, and I don't know, there's like this weird artificial chitter. It's all artificial, Steve. It's all synths. But there's like this weird chittering in the quiet side because it makes the track feel very alive, right? The only problem is, amidst the mayhem of the game itself, when you're playing it, it gets to feeling a little bit flat. Right? If there was ever like a vibe for the whole soundtrack of the series in a game, though, this is what I feel like. This is the vibe we should be going for. This uneasy balance of fear, terror, calm, fear, terror, calm, with a little bit of weird breathing in between. Does that make any sense? I feel like I'm rambling now.
No, totally. Like, this is a really interesting piece of music. It's wild, even if it takes some time to get through all of it, because it's sort of almost like in pieces. Like, it starts with one bit. I don't know, because I haven't played the game. I imagine it starts with one part, and then as you progress, it kind of changes and sort of layers more on top. Yeah, that makes sense, because it's sort of like a simple, spooky melody, and some, got a good amount of restraint to it, but then progressively adds more of sort of like that industrial edge that we were just talking about on top of it. The sort of screaming sound effect in it's incredibly effective, and I don't know, it's really interesting. I don't know Dussault's other compositions, and like you say, or necessarily who worked on what piece of music, but it really shows, if this is Stuart Copeland, it really shows his understanding of music in general compared to Spyro the Dragon and The Police, because this is so different and such an impressive sort of soundscape. And by the time this game came out, of course, we were up to our knees in Resident Evil clones. This is 2002 or something like that. It's very late
we were in a post-Veronica world.
Yeah, so they've got to do different things to stand out, and this definitely doesn't belong in any Resident Evil game, so that's a good thing. It's got its own flavour, and this one has several of its own flavours happening all at once by the end of it. There's so much going on. What I will say is, if you're not necessarily familiar with this piece of music, if it caught your ear, do go seek it out and listen to it properly, because we only play short clips, so I don't know if we necessarily give it the full sort of understanding, as you know what I mean, because it builds up and adds on top of it. I can only play you like 30 seconds. I'm not going to play the whole thing. So if you're interested, go listen to how it evolves, because it's really interesting. But yeah, intriguing.
Number 3, Opening. Or Stinger, I don't know. It's the kind of thing that plays at the splash of a start game, after the logos, So if this is like purely a contest of Alone in the Dark soundtrack as a whole, this is the one that wins it. Okay, it's got strong, straight out John Carpenter vibes for me. It feels like if the Thing theme and the Halloween theme had a baby, right? This is the kind of sci-fi horror energy I've been missing in my life for a great many years. Like, not to oversell it, but what we essentially have is the final boss theme as well, which is nice. It hits you right at the start. The whole thing evokes
cool.
terror in capital letters for me in the head. Like, it's that kind of like, boom, boom. It's got a lot of atmosphere, and then it just ends on like a dead note, like massive. I love that. I know that you just turn a track off midway through. No, it stopped because you died. It's terrifying.
If you name drop the thing in an episode of this show, then I'm all ears, of course. And I definitely get that. You're not wrong to compare this to Carpenter. As is the way with many horror things, he has such an impact on horror. And there's such a suffocating feeling to all of this. What I said before about the original game, about terror all around you, this is the musical apex of being backing away from a threat and sort of finding a wall behind you and realizing you can't go any further. This music is getting closer and closer to you, and I mean, it does get louder in its own way, not in a literal sense, but it adds more on top of itself, and it just gets more intense. The big pounding drum beat, really simple. It's your heartbeat. It's horrifying. It's exciting. If this is what plays as soon as you boot up the game, followed by the industrial title screen, I mean, turn it off after that. I'd go out for a cigarette. Goodness me, this is a lot all at once.
Oh, man. We were spoiled back then. That's all I'm saying. Okay, right. So we've gone through Alone in the Dark. We've gone through A New Nightmare. We're doing pretty well. We're doing pretty well. However, the line has to be crossed. Okay, so for number 2, it's going to be from Alone in the Dark 2008. The composer, I believe, is Olivier Derivière. I apologise if I have mispronounced that name. And the song's title is An End for a Prelude. So, you've not known tonal whiplash quite so much in and now that's what I call survival horror before, I'd imagine. Okay, we've gone from a synthy, ominous horror vibe, and now we're in a whole orchestra and choir. Like, it's pretty epic up there. So, right, I want you to picture this, okay? You've persevered through some of the most clunky and obtuse struggling controls for a video game in your lifetime, Si, okay? It's not just the combat, okay? You've got to try and traverse the environment. The inventory is literally on your person and does nothing pauses the game. And you're trying to drive a car made of bricks, right? And then you're met with the most bleak final ending of the game. Spoilers for the ending of the game. Either way, either you're possessed by Satan or your girlfriend is taken over by Satan and he ruins the world.
Nice.
It fades to black, and then it hits you with this, okay? Now, does it redeem the game? No, of course not, all right? But it's like it almost justifies it in just that general, like, feelings of horror, fear, sadness, all that stuff going epic, all right? My biggest shame and admission for this song, though, is I don't know any Bulgarian, so I have no idea what is actually being said. I'm just like, yes! I'm in it! I'm in it to win it! No idea what they're saying.
So, I know very little about this game, except that it has the inventory jacket system. Maybe something about fire physics, if that's this game? Maybe
yes.
I'm getting confused. Yeah, okay. And also that it was quite poorly received. So, listening to this immediately makes me go, maybe I want to watch a Let's Play of this game if I don't want to put myself through it. Because, wow, what I was not expecting production quality of this level when it comes to the music. Wouldn't have been any other wiser that I assume the Alone in the Dark 2008 soundtrack is really, really good going off of this one example. Positively cinematic, incredibly epic. In some points it feels like Final Fantasy, which, is kind of appropriate because the composer went on to work on Might and Magic and the Tangled video game adaptation. So, he's got fantasy in his locker, as displayed here. He's also, I'd looked it up, he won an award on Remember Me. And again, this is what I say about the quality of this. Yeah, I get it. Makes sense to me. I think
he also made the best tracks in Streets of Rage 4, just saying.
Yes, he is credited for that, yeah. You could play this to most people without any context and they could enjoy it as a composition by itself and as a display of orchestral music. It really goes places, ebbs and flows. It goes from the bam, 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 bam to the more downplayed stuff and then back again. Just thoroughly competent work. You don't need to enjoy it, no Bulgarian to enjoy the melody and how it's set to the music. Hard to say much more than that. Just a thoroughly good piece of classical music.
Shall I round us out, Si? Shall we end this escapade? Okay. Number 1. Who am I? Okay, so I fear that this is predictable from whatever niche fandom Alone in the Dark has. Okay?
I like that you say that. This is predictable, even though the episode started out talking about a game from 1992. But go on.
No, but if you think of music from the Alone in the Dark franchise, okay, this is probably... I feel like this is the one everyone should know, yeah?
Right.
For the context of the game, it's where you've just literally broken out of basically the tutorial. We've learned how to blink. We have learned how to swing a flaming object with our hands, and we have a jacket. It's all very, very cool. And then all of a sudden, the game expects you to drive through a collapsing street and careen violently into Central Park. All the while, this is just blaring at you, like giving you vibes. The main character at this point is obviously suffering with amnesia, so I think that's where the title comes from. But it's just got that constant energy building up and a constant ramp up where it shouldn't work, but it does. And it paces out even like my love for the scary synthwave stuff of The New Nightmare, like very strongly. Yeah, this is the one for me. I want to say it's like not... what's that Dan Brown thing? The Da Vinci Code. It's that kind of like cinematic feel to a horror game. Doesn't necessarily fit in like wider context of like a Resident Evil game and stuff. Maybe a boss fight or something. But here it's very on theme for the horror mystery vibe. And yeah, God knows why it's using a car chase, but it's fantastic.
I think it's kind of evident throughout this that everybody kind of knows this. This is not a big secret that Alone in the Dark has really struggled with keeping a consistent identity throughout its entire life, which is odd, obviously, as the game that's, as we said at the beginning, repeatedly been called the sort of progenitor of survival horror. Your list has displayed that sort of struggle with its identity. Musical highlights of it, for sure, but it's been so many things, just purely in its audio, let alone anything else. I think, actually, the New Nightmare stuff appeals to me the most because it feels quite different. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm talking, that's 2024 vision. And video games have just got progressively, well, maybe to some degree, more cinematic and closer to films. Whereas this soundtrack errs towards that. But, I mean, you can't deny the competence of this. Again, I'm just going to be repeating what I said on the last one, really. Like, this is incredible. White knuckle stuff, which is appropriate for what you just described as the set piece that it takes place in. And it makes sense. It feels fast. It feels tense. There's lots of weaving elements throughout it, sort of vocals and instruments that sort of blend around each other. It's just very well put together. Not to say that video games are lesser than films or anything like that, but movie composers get a lot more mainstream notoriety, which is silly to me because I don't see how this is any different from your famed film composer. Maybe not the most famous, but common film composer names, people recognize the name. Video game composers, you could say them to most people and they'd be like, don't know who you're talking about. Person on the street wouldn't have a clue, which is a shame because it's really hard to pick any issues with this. The wonderful fluid piece of work. It's got no flab to it. As the kids say, no notes really. I can't critique it because it. Yeah, it's even if it does sound like music from a 2008 video game onwards, it still does have its own charm though. The Bulgarian choir thing that you mentioned, I guess it should be highlighted. That's quite unique. Like you can pick that out from a lineup of this kind of music at least.
I say it was before that. Halo would have been around, but I feel like the Gregorian chants of like Halo 3 and stuff weren't a thing yet, right? You had or what have you?
They were definitely around by this point, but this is handled so differently. Like in Halo, they're like massively in your face. They're like the center point of it. Whereas I feel like in this, they stand out because they're different, but they're used to accent the music more than just like here is the main instrument all the time.
Fair enough.
I'm not casting shade on Halo, of course. But,
so, to put a thing on its side, can I ask your opinion on something?
Go for it.
Right. The internet tends to hold Alone in the Dark in a moderately a negative regard, but I feel like we've done at least our small part, right, to highlight at least the music's good.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a nice educational little journey for me. Not knowing too much about the series, just to see all the different places it's gone, and found success in a lot of them as well. Like there's all very good music to listen to. There's something for everyone from a musical standpoint here, which, as always, is kind of like, what do you do next with it? Like when your series is this kind of fractured in terms of its identity, not in general, but also the music. I'm really excited to see what the new game is like how they handle the music. I hope they don't do something too standard. I hope they do something different with it.
From what I understand, they go for that the New Orleans vibe, that kind of like.
Oh, nice. Okay, like sort of jazzy.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Oh yeah. Okay.
So I hope we hear some original Alone in the Dark 1 style stuff in there. Don't get me wrong, but like preferably with a more jazzy font, for want of a better term.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, that's the way to juxtapose the sort of. Wandering around music with here's the battle theme again and again and again.
No, not going. No, I can't.
Who knows? Maybe we'll do an episode on that game once we've had enough time with it. Maybe we'll get to an episode at some point. Let us know in the comments down below if you'd like us to cover the new Alone in the Dark and other franchises you'd like to hear us talk about on this show as well. Steve, any final thoughts on Alone in the Dark?
I kind of want to play Alone in the Dark: A New Nightmare again. They're all really good and deserve a little bit more praise, and I think the internet has been a little unkind to them over the years. Even 2008, like memes aside, it at least tried something new, and it's a little bit less homogenized as a lot of modern horror games tend to be.
Right. Yeah, I think it's one of those games where people go, do you know what? You can't fault it for trying some stuff. Like the jacket thing, everybody knows about that because it's such a bold thing to try and do. Whether or not it works, props for that much. But I'd like to cover the series a little more because we've not done it, as I say, up until now on the channel. So it'd be nice to dig into it a bit more and sort of unwind that mystery that it's a weird series that sort of coincidentally lurks in the dark. It's in the corner somewhere. People don't talk about it, which is a shame. We should do more of that. But yeah, as I say, let us know down in the comments below other games you'd like us to talk about. If you'd like to hear episodes of Now That's What I Call Survival Horror and everything we do a little bit early, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/FASprayPod. Steve, thank you for joining me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening/watching, and have a good week.